The XY Advisor podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. This content is created in partnership with our sponsor, Net Wealth Investments Limited, ABN 85090 569 109, AFSL 230 975, and is limited to publicly available information. Before acting on any general advice, you should consider whether appropriate and obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor. XY Advisor does not hold an AFS license and does not provide any financial advice or services or endorse any general advice. If a PDS or IM exists, you should obtain a copy and review it thoroughly before making a decision.
AdviceTech. As if it wasn't enough to be across TMDs, Alpha, Beta, Rule of 72 and all the other nuances of financial advice. Now, advisors are expected to be across all the technology options too, and there's so many of them. But never fear, Peita D is here. Join me each week on a journey of discovery through the software and apps on offer for advisors and advice businesses. So let's dive in, fellow advice explorers.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by NetWealth. Imagine a world where you can offer clients access to local and international investments. A world where you can engage with clients meaningfully, backed by powerful data and insights with mobile-friendly technology. A world where you can build business efficiencies through scaled managed accounts and bulk reporting. And a world where you can get all the latest news, research and insights to spot the changes that really matter. Wealth is more than just money. It's about opportunity and progress. A world of opportunity awaits you at netwealth.com.au/woo.
Hello and welcome to the XY Advice Tech podcast. I'm Peita Diamantidis, and the guest joining me here today to deep dive into the Dash suite of tools was actually a BDM back when coin software was a thing. You might be too young to remember that, but I do. Is a DJ in his spare time and recently joined us on stage at the XY Advisor All Licensee PD Day. Thank you so much for joining me on the show, Andrew Whelan. Woo!
Hey! Thanks, Peter.
You're welcome.
You've done some research there. You've dug up some embarrassing personal information. That's impressive.
Well, we've got to make you human. You know, you're the leader of this massive tech beast. We've got to make you human. To my point, actually, just to bring a bit more humanity, we love to get to know people through their technology use. What's your most used emoji? Do you even use emojis?
I don't. I am not a huge user, but I do have one that I love whenever I use it, which is like that Italian gesticulation, you know, like where you've got the fingers up, like someone gives you some good news and you just awesome,
bueno.
You know. So that I love as an emoji, but the rest are, the rest get a hard pass.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So then your smartphone, we all live on them, can't live without them. If you had to delete everything off the smartphone and just keep 3, what apps would you keep?
Yeah. I'm just looking at my phone now. So obviously we've got it boringly. Sorry, they're pings away just on cue there. Boringly, I've got to have the email calendar, all that sort of stuff. But the ones that so that's one. But the one that I cannot live without, and quite good for we're on a podcast now, is I'm a massive podcaster. So my brain doesn't switch off. And so I actually go to sleep listening to podcasts, and the more inane, the better, because if it's, someone's got a real story to tell, it actually does the opposite. But if it's a boring sort of comedy, boring but inane comedic podcast, that my brain can rest and then I go to sleep.
It's like that TV show you love that you can go to sleep to that just catches enough of your brain that it turns off. It's like I'm the same.
That's it. That's how I live my life. So my wife is always yelling at me because I've always got an headphone in one around the house, and she has to repeat herself constantly. So that's probably the big one.
Fair enough. I love it. Well, in podcasts, I mean, the variety is insane. Like any topic that you'd like to talk about or hear about. I mean, there's one I listen to that's a guy, basically it's a movie podcast, but it's through the lens of you've died and you get to know people through their movies, and that's how he interviews people. Like, it's the strangest and most bizarre thing, but really interesting because it becomes quite emotional.
Well, See, that one I couldn't sleep
too interesting.
right? Like that's a bit too tense for me.
All right. So we caught up at the XY Advisor or licensed UDPD, which is a mouthful, and had a conversation that could have probably gone on for weeks. And so before we dive into Dash, I guess I wanted to just chat about, where do we feel we're at in advice and in, our progress, and how you, and I'm happy to give my view too. How do you feel about where we're at versus where you'd like us to be at? How do you?
Do you know what? It's a good question. And, I think we're at a really critical juncture. So, I mean, I've done nothing but financial planning in my whole adult life. So for my sins in a previous life, like I've got a job at Count when I was 18, going to university, and I was there for 5 years, like picking up the phones, talking about superannuation, RBLs and all that sort of stuff back in the day. And I was there when FSR hit, and SOAs, or they were called financial plans, right? Where at the time went from 10 pages, just normal documents, to 130 overnight. And then we just haven't ever looked back. Like it's just sort of gotten worse and worse. And then the banks came in, and then that did, had certainly an impact on innovation and tech. And then obviously just the industry in general, Royal Commission. So it kind of, when you look back, it got grim there for a while. You know what I mean? It really did get grim. And then where it really landed for me was when, and I'm not going to get this stat right, but it's the AIA did that study into mental health of planners. And I think, and this is probably on the low side, but from memory, it was something like 40% of them are in regular contact with a therapist, right? And that just really hit home to how this is the people side of all of this regulation and the big banks and the reputational damage. Now, having said that, now we're actually kind of now that FASEA this is what it feels to me as advisors play this back. FASEA and all this sort of stuff is going through. The industry is becoming more professional. It's more fluid from a tech perspective. The banks are out, and everybody gets just the good, the wheat's being separated from the chaff, and the industry is sorting itself out. And I think it's grown up a lot really quickly. And from where I am today, sitting on the software tech side, it's the most exciting time that we've been part of, because everyone is a decision maker. There's 857 different businesses that can make their own choices and fashion their own business rather than being part of a huge brand.
It's certainly there's that feel of democratization of access to tech that's never been there. I mean, it never was. You'd meet with somebody why is it like this? Well, that's because the player that buys 50,000 licenses of this decides how this, it was just always, big end of town driven. And I get that. So there's absolutely no judgment in that. I get why that was the case. But I think what it meant is, to date, and along your lines of what we've all been responding to, it was reactive innovation, in that we just reacted to what was right in front of us. There was no discovery to the innovation. There was no wonder to the innovation. And that's what I feel like we're just I feel like we're getting over that hill where we can start to do a bit of the weird and wacky, a bit of the out there. And that's when you discover something that a client's going to love. They're like, oh my goodness, this is the best thing ever. I don't feel like we've really had one of those from a client perspective for quite a while. That magical thing. No, and that's right.
And I to be honest, I'm just picking up on something you said there. There's no judgment. I kind of, in a possibly unpopular opinion, but I kind of feel like there is a room for banks and in the space, because not everyone can afford advice. And I always thought it was strange. You go to a Mercedes place, it's dealer, someone's going to sell you a Mercedes, right? If you go to a bank, someone's going to sell you bank products, but it doesn't mean all the advice is sketchy. And it's just affordable. So I think some advice is often better than none. But anyway, it played out how it played out. But to your point, from a tech perspective, the people who are making big decisions are taking risk-managed decisions, you know what I mean, rather than a real swing for the fence, because there was just no and incentive to take a swing.
To be clear, in terms of risk management, when we say that, I think a lot of the industry hears, oh, well, they were protecting either themselves or their advisors. And the risk management controls aren't necessarily more protective. Often actually they're less so because they're restrictive or they're too checkbox or they're too, do you know what I mean? Like, it's interesting. They have all these construct, but actually, nope, you're not more compliant, so.
No, exactly. Yeah. And we saw that, that's exactly how it played out. So look, it's been a fascinating journey. It's been a fascinating journey and grim at times, but I think where we sit now is actually a pretty good place, pretty exciting sort of place to be in and about trying.
And that's
things.
Probably a nice entree into Dash, is because there's only a handful of operators like you that are sort of going for this more marketplace approach, something that's hey, you can pick the combo of things that you think might suit you, which is certainly not how it was historically. And there's only a few doing that now. So I'd love to sort of understand for you guys the psychology behind that. Like, what was the decision that this is the way we're going to approach this?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. So I'll get into that. But the first thing that people have got to understand about Dash is, the advice marketplace. So is that, and I'll talk about, that's the piece that facilitates all of the integrations that you're referring to. But our big swing for the fence, right? And this is what we're saying now is the time, is we are, for the first time, or at least since Advisor Netgain, for people who can remember that was much loved, but restricted to bank products, right? From Bass and George, is that we have built a platform, and when I say platform's an overused word, right? So I mean like an investment super wrap platform that integrates into our financial planning software and which anyone can use. And the reason for that is you think about how big platforms are and how much money they make and how successful they are. And you don't ever deny or judge people for being successful, but I always feel like they're very richly rewarded for staying in their lane, right? So like the advisors go from fact find to the financial planning process is so long and involved, and then the execution and reporting, while critical, you've got to get it right? So we run a platform, so we know how hard it is, but it feels like there's a real opportunity if you've got a platform to reach deeper into practices and get to know them and use some expertise. Yeah.
And there is a challenge too, because, and we hit this wall all the time, and I imagine this is a lot of where you're coming from, is everything up to that point, you can be super efficient. You can be running a Formula One. Like, you can just have a practice that is the slickest, the most exciting, the most fantastic, the most effective, and it hits product land and suddenly you're driving your Formula One car on pothole-ridden roads. Like, it's just a disaster. Right. And so you can't run the thing at 200 kilometres an hour. It's running at 20 kilometres an hour, because the minute it hits that implementation piece, it becomes, because it's in somebody else's world. That's understandable, but I agree with you. There's a frustration to that.
Yeah. And it just feels like one of those things that has always been, but it never has it been challenged. Like, I don't think there was an advisor in the room that said, you know what, let's keep financial planning advice production separate from execution. Never the two shall meet before. So when we've rolled this idea out, this strategy out, the feedback is overwhelmingly been fine, right? Because really the platform should fall back to the background. And so that's Dash, right? Dash is the old the Wealtho 2 platform and raw software coming together, right? And integrating and blending the worlds of software, advice provision and platform. But to your point, the advice marketplace, so you build software these days. So when I was selling Coin, you mentioned that 2003, we were selling against Xplan and Busy and anyway, there was a couple of others I've forgotten about, but you had to be the best at everything, right? So every module, I've got it, and so you have to beat the competition at every single module, and then the result is binary, right? So like, you either get the deal or you don't, right? But if you think, so that's from a sales perspective, it's frustrating because you can't be the best at everything. At all, in all rooms, at all times, right? But from a user perspective, from an advisor perspective, it just means it's so scary because you're just locked in for 7 years and you can't. And if you sign that contract and the next day some kid revolutionises the financial planning world with some app that's got APIs at the back from their bedroom, then you can't access it, right? So, we've taken this sort of the very much the Salesforce Zero style view of the world where we will manage the integration, right? So we will, rather than, outsource this to the planners and who have to put in, people who are pseudo tech people in to manage all their integrations. We can be the center piece, but you can build a custom ecosystem. So we've got 30 apps in our advice marketplace. Some of them we've built. We will place bets on what we think we're uniquely good at. And we've got modeling and we think the best digital advice SOAs, the goals-based modeling tool, all sorts of stuff, a CRM. But I don't want to build a commissions tool, for instance, and it's not a skill set. So we'll just plug into 3 of them and you can decide, And so I just think that's the way of the future. But the benefit is you get access to that, but then you're outsourcing the management of the integrations to a partner, which is us.
The other nice thing about that when I think about it is because you're not doing the whole, I'm knocking down my house and rebuilding this entire thing, then you can renovate a room at a time effectively. So it means you can do this piecemeal, which, to be frank, not only is that less frightening, it's also more manageable. I mean, very few people can shut down a practice for 3 to 6 months to get a massive transfer. And I mean, if you're going to move everything, that's probably what you'd need to do. It's insane. It's really hard to do. Yeah. Whereas if you can piecemeal it from whatever the most driving problem you have first, right through that's exciting too. And more likely to leap.
It is. And it is. So that helps. I think it's a win-win for everyone. A win for us because we can, have more conversations. But instead of being a product flog, the BDMs love it here because they get to go out and ask the question and mean it. What's going on in your practice? Where how can we help? And then if it's an asset of ours that we can plug in to make your life better, that's great. But if it's someone else's, that's equally good too.
And I think, and there's some other things you've folded in there that I think might go through, sort of people might miss things like, I think you call it highlighter now. It used to be called something else where, if there's something you use that's like an Excel calculator or a groovy thing that even maybe is internally used, it doesn't need to be necessarily just with the public, then you guys can turn that into sort of a really powerful online tool. You can convert something that's just Excel. There's some real magic in that. If there's a particular experience you've got with your clients and you use this one thing to demonstrate that, whatever the calculation is, then just turn it into a little web tool. Wow.
Yeah. No code, right? So we've actually got a global patent on that. And so, you could basically take if you've got a spreadsheet that a paraplanner in your business
always uses
loves or whatever, someone uses it, you can take all the risk out and we can turn it into an app, like a cloud-based app. And turn it around in 4 to 6 weeks. So there's really, and we build a lot of our internal applications on Highlighter as well because it's just so fast and easy to use. But it's a really cool piece of kit that, we don't speak about a lot because not a lot of planners are interested, but it is, it's super clever.
And it's one of those things that when I think about where, the value sits or the gold in most practices, it'll be something repetitively difficult. So that's a challenge. And that could be that they've always got to, enter data a certain way or they do it incorrectly or somebody else does it for them. Whatever it might be, to discover something like that tool, okay, there's some weaknesses with Excel. We can't quite get it to do what we need it to do or protect it the way we need to protect it. Turn it into an online tool and suddenly it takes away that challenge.
Yeah.
There's...
And that key man risk as well. So this is the one nightmare is this, we help a lot of people with someone's built a spreadsheet and then someone's left and no one knows how to update it anymore. I want to keep using it, but how do I update the super rates of the Centrelink?
Exactly.
So, it's a really, and that's ultimately sort of the dash. If we take a step back, this dash story that if we as we sort of roll out, we only merged in April this year. So the two businesses to create Dash. But we just have all this kit so that if you've got a problem, you can just, if we get this right, an advisor's got a problem, they'll just say, I'll just ring Dash first because they have it, they have everything, or they've got a partnership with, with someone, with a partner that can fill the gap for us. So that's ultimately the world we're trying to create, is this utility for tech.
And I'm betting then from your team that go out and then talk to people, that means they've probably got a more consultative approach, because it's more about helping the client discover, or the advisor discover what they need, and then, hey, this is what you could potentially do to solve it, as opposed to, here we have a widget, let us jam it into your practice.
Jam it. Yeah, it is. And I've been on that side of the fence before, where you're talking to someone and you just get this feeling that they're just waiting for their moment to launch into the product spiel. No, so we have the opportunity, and we take it all the time to be really consultative, to the point, and we presented this at the XY day, is that we've actually came up with a framework of how, like, there's a little piece of our IP, right? We call it an innovation implementation framework, or the IIF, where we have seen thousands of practices implement software. And to your point before, some of them will take 3 months, 6 months, and then hate it, right? And still not get what they want.
Remorse. Big time.
Big buyer's remorse, and then but stay, because the nightmare
not doing that again.
that it was to implement it. I'm not going to do it again, right? So they get stuck to something that they hated so much, this feeling of sunk cost. But anyway, what we've seen people do it, that, if we call that done badly, and then we've got the other people who just seem to take it like a duck to water, and they just get the most out of it immediately. And so we've analysed, what is the secret to that? Why is one struggling so badly and implement the same tech over here, and they're just nailing it? So what is the difference? And what we've come up with is really interesting, is that in software, software in particular, what we get asked for is, can you do modeling on family trusts and SMSFs and like all the complexity? And I kind of get it. It feels more like, are we really in financial planning, or are we software? Like, do we know? It's more of a, do we really know what we're talking about? But it is the wrong thing. But then if we win that, if we get through that, we'll win the deal. But really what people should be asking is where rather than sort of the hard stuff is, the complex stuff for new clients, and perhaps you only do 20 of them in a year. What do you do 300 of, right? And then it's the maintenance. And most advice businesses that have, you would know this, right? Like you're in the review game.
100%.
You've got a mature, you're in the review game and the FDS game and all of that sort of stuff. So really, if you can knock off half an hour off something you do 400 times a year, that is such a bigger win. And then you get the big complex family trust, even if you had to do that in Excel, even if we did nothing else, but we helped that would be the huge win for the practice. So I think when people they hate what they've got currently, but they approach a business like ours, is that they sort of get a little bit lost in the demo and, this is what they should really be coming to us with, and we should be teasing this out as well. Our sales guys should be teasing this out, is where are your problems and how can we help? And use the advice marketplace to put in the best product, whether it's ours or someone else, for that, and don't leave that implementation until it's done, right? Until you've achieved your goal,
see the wins,
and then move on to the next. See the win.
And I would argue for most advice practices, I really am generalizing here, but I think it's a fair generalization, is if you just sort of asked us all, hey, gee, what's the biggest frustration? Every one of the biggest frustrations will be an advisor frustration. The challenge is what they won't be listing is the support team frustrations, which will be 40 times as long. And generally, if you can knock those off, you've recovered half or even a full person. Like the support, and it trickles on to elsewhere. So if your support team member can get back a couple of hours a day, then they can do more for the advisor. It all trickles through. Whereas we have this focus, our pointy end focus of what we do. And to me, there's far more repetitive volume of activity that goes on in the rest of the team. And that is where some great gold is, really valuable.
Yeah. 100%. And that's pretty much what the framework that we came up with really realized when we analyzed it, is that if you nail the unsexy stuff first. Then, so often it's people with, problem with reviews, and our platform, which is way more easier to implement a platform than it is a CRM, right? But everyone starts at the CRM. But if our platform can solve, like it has the coolest review, automated review thing, right? Functionality where you do bulk, pings out the reviews, the client signs it on DocuSign, and the system waits for it to come back and then places it in the market without anyone having to watch or maintain it, right? So that takes all this time away from the support stuff that you mentioned, right? And so then you can work, if you almost work back to front and you say, get that humming, then by the time you get to automating or putting this cool goals-based modeling software like that we have, Archer, so it's awesome for the front of house and paraplanning, but it's really cool that you can model in front of a client. But if you don't buy the time, like if you nail your sales process, all you're going to do is put more pressure downstream on the poor people who are implementing the software, which will implode, right? And that's ultimately the insight that we glean from this review, is that there's a way to do it, and we think we've sort of cracked that.
And the interesting thing that I find, which we've had happen, is once we created that bandwidth at the back end, then the advisors became a bit more willing as well to go, all right, well, why don't they do some setup of the first step? So even with your modeling tools, say with Archer, okay, let them get some first steps that they can just be trained to enter and do. And, for this type of client, put that in, and then it gets handed to the advisor to do the next step, or the paraplanner. So the advisors go, oh, well, that person has capacity. Okay, well, I can show them how we do this step. And then, the expert just comes in for the second step. Whereas when they look at them and all they're doing is, the paperwork and submissions and all that sort of stuff, then they're never going to hand over that stuff. They're going to be fearful then it won't get done. So, and
then you're stuck on the same hamster wheel, right? Like
exactly.
Nothing gets improved.
Exactly.
So that's what we've gleaned.
Yeah.
But to circle right back to where we started, the really cool part that makes us a little bit different is we can solve it with our assets, or we can solve it with someone else's, and we are equally happy to do that. In fact, we've got one of the strangest things of my business that still spins me out is that we are paid by about 300 planners to integrate Astute Wheel with Xplan.
Right.
So, and they use none of our tech,
right?
But there's like a whole dealer group that pays just a small fee for us, but we just handle that data handoff between the two. So,
which is an interesting thought. I think that's worthwhile for the listener, is that there's some glue or gel that you guys can provide. That's that connector.
That's it.
And once you think that way, then you're probably more open to the other tools you have as well. It's like, oh, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah. 100%.
This can get a bit easier. And I know for having checked things out that the other thing is because of the way either you guys have either negotiated or dealt with, say, something like Xplan, then somebody could just get that one module they need or love. Maybe there's one thing they love about Xplan. They just want that one thing. Then they can do that via, Raw with you guys, where they'd probably struggle if they were going direct, because there's certain things you need to add on in a modular basis.
And I certainly, like, I understand this, but because I ran a paraplanning business for 7 years back in the day, and just through the GFC, which was not the best timing. Anyway, we got through it. But the key component of that, and I think you've alluded to this already, is because we've got the glue, you can sort of deploy piece by piece and nail it, right? Which means what it also means is if the compliance person loves the Xplan CRM,
right,
you can stay on that and then use everything else that we've got.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Yeah.
And likewise, if there's a singular paraplanner that just loves Xtools, have been using it for 25 years, they have seen no benefit in changing, that's cool too, right? Like we can build around that and then still deploy more apps to facilitate.
And it's a really important change management approach. It's probably something we don't really cover much in our industry, is change management. But if you can ease the fear of the paraplanner and saying, no, it's all right, you stay where you are. We're going to do these other things. But you know what? In 12 months, once you get used to the other things, we'll run it past you again. Let's see what you think, and the more they need to experience new tools, the more they do get comfortable with that. That's just a fact. We actually she's just recently retired, but we had a wonderful support team member who when she first joined us, she was just like, oh my goodness, Peter, you can't be serious. Like, she's of an age where, even using a mobile phone was a bit, originally a challenge. Whereas by the end of it, she was the one I'd first get to look at it. She got so used to, all right, so it's okay if I don't know what I'm doing. It's okay if I just try it out. It's okay if we give it a whirl. And I'd send it to her to break it, See how you go. Go hard. Tell me what doesn't work. Tell me, because we would design our training based on her experience, because she would be but they said to right click on the cross, but it's not a cross, it's actually a down arrow, or all that stuff.
Right.
Which is important. For change management is really, really important. For sure.
Yeah, 100%. And what a win, right? To be able to turn someone that's of an age.
Yeah.
And this is where people get stuck, and we hear it all the time, where advisors are like, I badly want to change, but the headspace, that's required to do it. They know they want to, they know they need to, but just the fear of leaping often can keep them stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where, it is down to picking, your first adventure. I mean, one of the things that, you might be interesting, depending on the type of clients they have. I know with dynamic docs that you guys have, which is interesting to have, this avatar talking somebody through their advice as they're going to sort of, a choose your own adventure style almost to hold their hand. This is an interesting concept, particularly, what's appealing of that to me is I can be that avatar too. So it doesn't need to be a cold, distant thing. I could record a whole lot of stuff that you guys could use in there that would just make them feel comfortable as they're going through it,
Right. But also what dawns on me is it can give your business some leverage.
Yeah.
Like the planning business is if you're delivering all the advice one-to-one, your growth just hits a natural ceiling. That's not that approach is not as scalable as a model where if you were pinging out a digital SOA and the client can read it in their own time. I'm thinking specifically around reviews, right? Because we're in this review game. And then because it's software, like it's any SOA, Dynamic Docs can take any SOA and just turn it into a web browser. So it's software. So you just click your way through. But because it's software, all the graphs move.
Right.
It can time how long the client is on each section. Right. It's got an inbuilt chat, all this sort of stuff.
And things that you want them to confirm or acknowledge or, all of that, like really.
All that stuff. Yeah. All that. And it's a really good point. Those hard and soft gates, we call them.
Right.
And what that does is it gives you compliance tools. So if you ever get in trouble and get hauled before, fix, is it? I think it's called something else now, but
or even just your compliance, your internal,
or the compliance, there's a client or a client complains and say, I never understood this. And you're like, well, you spent 5 minutes on it, on that section, and you acknowledged your way through it, right? That you understood it. So you don't get that with a Word document, right? But so it's got these compliance tools that are really slick. But to your point, the avatar, what you can basically just record yourself on your phone and then go up to YouTube or Vimeo, and then you're in a box down the bottom, and you can explain or be delivering 180 pieces of advice
all at once,
all at the same time. Yeah. So this is a scale. It's all of a sudden it's a real scale game,
and it's because it's not scale is something we talk about, but I don't think people only hear robo when they hear scale. And scale is anything that is more people than you can currently see, in my view. It's just amplification. That's all it is. How do we get to more? And one of the things that really appealed about what you're describing is your advisor, you send out a great review. It's fantastic. It could be written, in the most easy to understand way, but there's just one thing that they've got a question about. If you design that journey with the avatar well, you're preemptively handling a question.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is it's not just your own time you're saving, it's the client's time that you're respecting.
Yeah.
Right? Because you instantly answer the question that they otherwise didn't know they would have had.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's really clever, and I think it's something that we see some of the bigger practices really like their eyes light up because they can see that this is a way to grow more and deliver advice more cheaply.
Yep.
So which is all advisors want to do is help people.
Yeah.
Right? So, but the cost has been so prohibitive that we've as an industry, we've had to shed clients, which is just a real bummer.
Yeah, it is.
Like these people need help, but we just can't see our way clear to do it. So this is a real opportunity. Like the advisors, when they see this, they go,
Ooh.
they immediately feel a bit weird. They're going to have to like go to camera, right? So that takes a bit of getting used to. They're like, oh my God, maybe we just outsource it or we get someone to do it. But yeah, it's a real opportunity to add scale, and your definition is the perfect one.
Yeah, and I think, that's where it's finding, to me, talking to you guys is about finding the most impactful first entry point, and for some practices, they might be about to go, well, either I hire a number of like we're at that tipping point where we might need to hire another advisor, which is hard right now. Like it is hard to hire advisors. There's less and less of us, a bit like hen's teeth at the moment. Or could you get some bandwidth by doing something like this? Like, could you do something such that your current advisors can actually see, more people or at least the current ones in a more easy and less jammed in process? Because I've been back on the tools this year, and what I've realized is, it's, yes, the advice process or the analysis or the doc preparation, that's all of that can have some work, but also it's the client calls in and doesn't get you. So you call them back and they don't get, you don't get them. And then they're like, oh my goodness, like the wasted time, on both sides. So anything that can preemptively, make that experience feel smoother, feels like we know them because we design that avatar so well, the things that it covers, the things it talks about, and we do know them that well. We know what we say 400 times a review. We know.
Yeah,
We're ready with the script.
Trot that out.
Pest play,
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. I mean, current markets, right? The last 12 months, I must have said what's been going on 200 times. Well, why wouldn't we have that? As just something that can be embedded.
Just say it once.
Yeah.
Just say it once and embed it. Yeah, that's exactly it. And there was something, I must dig it out, but I read somewhere and I classically forgot about what the source is. But this sort of thing is really prominent in the States.
Yep.
So this is where we've fallen a fair way behind in sort of the tech. Like the advice marketplace style thing is really prominent over there, but also this willingness to embrace, to make yourself bionic, right? So like it's still you, but it's you in a box. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Times 180, right? And they did a study that, because they rolled it out, that when people were doing recordings of themselves, that the clients still felt like it was the advisor talking to them, because they have a personal relationship that's underpinning all of this. They can call them. And so it actually had no effect or a positive effect on renewal rates, right? Yep. So that people, I think that's a concern as well, is that advisors like, clients, they're used to this, so if I implement this, how's the change management again, going to roll out? And it's, if you take the lead from the States, is the clients love it. Because
our brain does process video as them being in front of us. We might not, but our brain does. So it's going, they're right here, they're talking to you,
I know that guy.
I know that.
I know. Yeah.
So that and there's probably an untapped sort of connection point. We're not using that well enough because that has real value. Even if it is one-to-one, as in you're doing it just for that client, having the recording as opposed to just doing it over a phone or a meeting means they can go back, and they can revisit it and they can, so there's real, there's room.
It's tooling.
Yeah.
And then just to really labour the point on the advice marketplace, if you are wedded, let's just suggest you're wedded to Xplan, right? You can still drop this in. Right. This is the world we live in now. You can you can use everyone else's tech. And then we can drop just the dynamic doc bit over what your existing thing is. So if the listener is lit up by this, but they don't want to move, you don't want to move, you can just make it your life better tomorrow.
Right.
Just by dropping that in.
And a bit exciting. I love these things where everybody gets a bit, like there's a morale builder about some of this stuff in the team where it can just lift everybody's energy. What about, what part of the full suite do you think just brings the client closer? I mean, actually Dynamic Docs is probably one of them, but are there any other parts where you find it can really bring that connection a bit closer to the advisor? Yeah.
So really I think about the two areas really. So the modelling, I feel like, is a wasted opportunity, and one of the places where we've invested is to solve modelling.
Yes.
And as an old paraplanner, it's the forecast, obviously the projection is often the most thing that people look at, right? Planners tell me that all the time, but it's static.
Yes.
And is just word. And if there's anything wrong, you've got to go back and mark it up and then go back and reproduce it, and it takes another, 5 hours.
Yeah.
So we've developed this thing called Archer, this module called Archer, which is goals-based. You drag down the strategy and it does the maths for you, right? So we're living in a world where like Xplan and Midwinter and all of, a lot of the incumbent sort of providers do. I've had to use them, and Coin back in the day when I was using them, like I thought was the best at modeling trusts and stuff, but I still had to optimize. Right. I still had to figure out how much to put in, how much to take out to meet the expenses. Yeah. But in 2022, we can do better than that, right? We can do the maths for you. Yeah. So we know the rules, and they don't change that regularly. Yeah. So I don't feel like there's any excuse there's no need to continue to be the optimizer, use your brain. Yeah. So we can run the maths. But because it's goals-based, you can show it as software in the meeting as well, and then tinker. Right. And so tinker on the fly. Ooh, so if your paraplanning tool, what if, right? And that's what I think brings clients in, that engages them, because it's their life, right? Yes. Like it's one of my favorite rants to go on, but I hate benchmarks. Yeah, right. I hate them because I don't think any person, we run a platform and we do reporting versus benchmark, right? And I get that's useful, but I don't believe, and this is more my opinion than Dash's opinion, so put this in its place, but I just don't believe that people walk down the street worried about the performance of their portfolio versus a benchmark, right? Like they don't go, well, I lost 10%, but the ASX 200 lost 13, so I'm sweet, so I'm pretty chirpy. Yeah. And likewise on the upside, but all people really care, and this seems to become more pronounced since COVID, is they just want to be able to live the life that they want. Yeah. And if you can funnel everything through goals, it's a lot less scary when markets go down. Mm-hmm. And so but B, it changes the conversation completely. Yeah. Is the feedback that we get. It's all about the client. Yeah. It's not about us and our investment philosophy and this, that, and it's all important. And
actions they can take, which is empowering.
Yeah, in actions, So what if I did this? Yeah. So I think that's critical. And then we're building, and if I can get this done, I'll leave the industry a happy man, is to close that loop on the portal. So rather than have, the market's been incredibly volatile. We've had markets days where it's dropped 2% in the morning. Mm-hmm. But if someone has a portal and they look, if this stayed here, my goal has dropped from 89% to 87%. Yep. And the long-term goals, that lens has that effect. Yep. It's much more calming. Yes. So I think if you've got your front of house, it's a good goals-based solution, and then you've got the client has that at home as well, and that becomes the language in which we speak to clients, that I think that is, in addition to the dynamic docs, but digital SOA, it's a different world. Yeah, it is. It's a different language, and I think the client engagement just goes through the roof.
Yeah, it does. I completely agree. And so have you guys got, and I apologize for not knowing this before I'm asking the question, but have you already got a portal in terms of, transferring documents or anything like that as part of the suite?
Yeah, we do. So we have one, of course, we've got the platform, right? So that we've even got a native app on Android and iPhone. So, but what we will be doing as part of this the merged entity and as part of this integration effort is we want the portal to have data feeds, obviously live API stuff from our platform, but then anything else in there, plus all of the bank account, debt, real estate, the whole thing, and then get the whole client in the whole client view, but then layer over the goals, right? And then that's the client portal that I want to live with, rather than having multiple. You could just have whole client view with the lens, with the lens of the goals.
It's what they want, because they think about their money in a holistic, like one picture sense. They don't think about it as, my bank money's there and my super. Like, they don't think that way.
My super, exactly.
It's just their money, broadly. Yeah. Okay, so is there any little, hidden ninja things that you just think people probably don't take advantage of? So the users you have don't quite take advantage enough of yet that you think, they really need to check that out?
Where we're seeing the best results, and this is going to come off completely self-serving, but there's one advisor who we just love here, right? And he just lives a great life. He's a soccer coach at night at a high level, and he's just one of those advisors that seems to have time, right? Time for us, time for their clients. He's rarely flustered.
Yep.
So I've taken him out to lunch a few times, and what he's actually done is he's moved all his assets onto our platform.
Yep.
So he's got one platform. He runs managed accounts, right? So he's got an MDA, so he does that. But then he took advantage of the advice marketplace, so he got that sorted, right?
Yeah.
So back to that advice. So he got that. So his back office is two staff, right? So he's got one advisor, 2 staff. And then he's got it all humming there, and then he's added on Archer for the front of house, and he's just trying dynamic docs, right? So piece by piece. This is over the course of 2 years, right? So it's been a slow burn, but it's one advisor managing 125 mil across 250 clients, right? So that to me is a success story from a tech perspective, and just shows the value of having everything in one place. And even though he's using other apps through the advice marketplace, he doesn't key in the same data twice, right? And the amount of times when we ask the question is, how many times are you rekeying data? Like, it can get up to 7 or 8. Like, if you include platforms in templates, in CRMs, into different off to insurance providers and quotes, it's horrendous. It's crazy. And so I think rather than sort of any one feature, it's the framework, and thinking about your business holistically and committing to, I'm just going to put it in all my stuff in one place rather than having 6 platforms and then a different tech stack. I think that's the real ninja.
And I think it's a great example, because the other thing I'd say is somebody that advisors will often ask, but what should I be doing about this, and should I start, is I think we do need to cut ourselves some slack here. Like, this stuff is change and it is distracting and absorbs time. So just start. Just start.
Yeah.
And like you say, pick an effective point, start with that, give yourself time to embed it, give yourself time to have the rollout and the lessons and see the value, and then go again.
But it is different. But it is a different message. So this is our challenge, right?
Yeah.
It's not advisors aren't expected to, we shouldn't expect them to understand this innately, because when we were selling software to them for the last 20 years, it was like all or nothing, right? So this is a challenge,
one ring to rule them all.
That you can solve a problem one piece at piecemeal, and you don't have to. So that's our challenge here at Dash, is to really work with people within this framework, and only automate and get their processes right, and be aware of where the process falls down, and we need to engage support staff and make sure we understand their business before we implement.
Right.
And then, it's a whole different approach.
It is. And I think, for a business owner too, if you can't enunciate the 47 steps that support person goes through to do their thing, you don't have processes yet, because anybody should be able to describe it. If you know what I mean, like, they should be a place where they go, okay, those are the things they do. Now, they can be better at it. They can be really comfortable with it and effective and know their stuff really well, but you should be able to describe it. Whereas I think because we are so advisor focused, then we can do that for the advisor, but probably not for the rest of the team, and we need to be able to do, just to run a business, you need to be able to do that. You need to understand the experience of each of your team members, for sure.
Well, and the last point on that is it's worth doing before approaching any tech provider, because of the reasons we've covered. But also processes, they'll surprise you. Like, they're a moving piece. Like, you think you knew it 2 years ago, and then you go, hold on. Things have changed, and so it's worth a recap before engaging with us or with anyone.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things before we wrap up, I am curious about, you've sort of talked about where you guys specifically are, some next things on the horizon. Is there any unicorn things a bit further out that you'd love to see happen or you'd love to be a part of down the track? Is there anything really, gee, it'd be wonderful if?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would love, it would be wonderful. There will be a time and place where every piece of tech in the market, and this is very sort of tech shop orientated, but where every piece of tech in the market has the ability to plug in like Lego, right? So not only do they have the tech, like they're built post 2010, right? Like which was 12 years ago, right? So this is a surprising conversation to be having. We're like the market, the financial planning market is dominating by software that's more than 20 years old, right? So I think 68% of the platforms of money is still on platforms that have been around since the early 2000s. So if you have tech like that, your options are limited. But if you go to the States, so much new tech is being built all the time, and they are being built with the view to integrate and to integrate play nicely. Yeah. So there's a willingness and a philosophy there, and then there's the actual tech chops to do it. Yeah. So then advisors can, in that world, they can build a tech stack that's completely custom, but with none of the drawbacks of having to forego data, integrity and privacy and all of that sort of stuff. Like it can all be, so you get all the good stuff without any of the harmful nasties where data just goes missing, So,
absolutely.
That'd be a hell of a place to live.
It would be. And it's something that, I'm with you there because it's frustrated me when you go into entrepreneur world, right? So you're outside of advice and you're in, coaches or trainers or podcasters or any of the other world, then any new app in that world must integrate. Like people won't use it if it doesn't. Like they just won't.
That's right.
Like sorry. Not in.
Yeah. No, sorry. What's the point of it?
Right. It's a bare minimum. Yeah. And so, I'm with you. I'd love to be at that point because there will be loads and loads of combos of two things that will have more impact than the sum of their parts. The people will combine two things and you're like, oh my goodness, that is magic, and because tech providers, even like yourselves, will be willing to do that, then there'll be more and more of those magical combos, there will be more and more because you're being open about it. Yes, we want to collaborate. Yes, we want to integrate, it's less defensive and protective. Which, I think that'll be really exciting, and then it's down to the individual's creativity, really. Go nuts.
Use your imagination.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Is there anything we've missed? Probably. But is there anything particularly we've missed?
Oh, look, not really. I just really enjoyed the chat. Thank you, Peita. It's been fun, and I think we've covered a lot in a shorter period of time.
Exactly. We could have the 6-hour episode, but I think that's a bit rough. That's a lot to expect of people. All right, Advice Explorers, if you'd like to find out more about, the Dash suite of tools, then the website link is in the episode show notes, along with Andrew's LinkedIn details. So he'll, poke him on LinkedIn and then he'll point you in the right direction of a member of the team that can look after you, I'm sure. Thank you for joining us, Andrew. It's really great to see advisors and advice practices just having options, to feel a bit more freedom. And so, I'm really excited to see the future permutations of how you guys can sort of bring different tech together to support their client experience. So, are you a current user of Dash? Or of Archer, or of Dynamic Docs, or they do any of the tools we were talking about. Maybe you agree or disagree with our discussion of all of those tools. Please share insights on the XY community platform. In fact, I referred to the platform to make sure I drew out some of the things you guys have been discussing. It's great when we share these things and really give our experience and insight to, other practices and other advisors that are looking at these tools. So please, I'd encourage you to go and do that. And as for my thoughts from that, I think, there's sort of two key things I'd say. One, the magic, and having implemented a lot of tech in our business over the years, the magic of having this suite of opportunities to choose from is you can just solve your most immediate problem first. Maybe you want to upgrade your CRM, or maybe you want more out of a modeling tool, or maybe document generation is driving you nuts. Whatever it is, that's that one thing that you feel will have the most impact for you, but also for your team, right? No matter what it is, you can just engage on that front first. Then over time, you can just gradually pick your next challenge and compare what tools are available in something like, say, the Dash sort of marketplace or their suite of tools against what you're currently using, and just keep on this compare game, right? And then, all right, what other one am I going to plug in and change, right? So it lets you do this piecemeal. It doesn't need to be an all or nothing exercise. And, aside from ensuring you get the right tool for the job, which isn't easy and requires some energy, what this means is you aren't trying to implement a complete end-to-end solution in one hit, right? We've probably all as consumers experienced when a provider does this, when maybe a telecoms provider does, or even when a platform does, and they upgrade your tech and then it just all hell breaks loose, right? It just invariably does. This is when we do this on this full end-to-end replacement. It's just a surefire way to make you age prematurely. Honestly, it is hard and it is torturous. Piecemeal at a time will let you and your team absorb and adjust to the new technology and really ensure that you embed the value, you embed the improvement before you take the next step. The other part I'd say that I'd reiterate, and Andrew sort of enunciated this as well, is take the time to deeply understand every process in your practice, every experience a client goes through. What's the process when they come into the office? What's the process, right? Understand all of those. Just document them all, even if it's boxes and arrows, because that conversation you'll have with your team to do that can just highlight these disastrous, repetitive, manual, difficult, complicated, torturous things. I remember one session I ended up doing with a practice where the single most frustrating thing for the team as a whole, but primarily the admin team, was the scanner they used was so slow. One of the team was standing up at the scanner for about half their day. Right now, these things, once resolved, which was just upgrade to a decent scanner, which isn't a huge outlay, unlocked hours and hours a day. Right, so it doesn't need to be the sexy front-end advisor analysis or wonderful things. It can be this back-end stuff that can really transform not just the practice, but the morale of the team. Right, let's all have happy staff. Let's fix those things that frustrate them. Now, as you know, only one skill we need to become bionic advisors. That's avid curiosity. And I'm hoping we're a little ways into this process here. We're a few episodes in, so hopefully you're starting to build that curiosity muscle. But to help you build a habit, today's Curiosity Corner app that caught my eye is Airgram. Now, you can find it at airgram.io. Now, this is interesting. Their tagline says, focus on your meetings, not your notes. And basically, it's for internal and client meetings, virtual ones, ideally, video ones. And it automates joining, recording, and note-taking with some sort of clever AI. Right. So for me, what's interesting about this is you could be having a video meeting. It could be in Zoom. It could be in Google Meet. It could be in Teams. They're indifferent to that. And you turn on Airgram to record it and transcribe the discussion in real time. So it's doing that in front of you. But also you can set an agenda that then you can step through, and you could make separate notes as you go, right? You can then download the recording to save against your client's file. But I just like this dynamic transcription. You can interact on it, amend it as you go. Basically, you can be focusing on the conversation while the record keeping thing happens aside. Now, it's really important when you're using tools like this to run it past compliance. So I'd encourage you to do that, but you can test it for free and get 5 recordings to just give it a try. So, you may even find that it's useful for team meetings to have notes taken as you go, have an agenda, get some structure. So I'd encourage you to check it out and let me know if you like it or not. Either way. Welp. That's all we've got for this week. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you'll get your advice tech fix automagically sent to you each Friday. And I just want to take a moment to welcome you back from the end of year break. I hope you and your loved ones had a safe and really relaxing time together, and you're ready to leap into 2023 as only Advice Explorers can. Now, with that in mind, Jenny Pearce and I have a couple of spots available for our Niche Down and Scale Up workshop in February. This is sort of about narrowing down who you focus on and who you're going to be really trying to attract in 2023 for your new business, and then tailoring your systems and processes to optimize their experience and make life easier for you while you're at it. So the first session in February is in Sydney. However, we've actually had loads of interest all over the countryside. So if you are keen, then please reach out on LinkedIn /PeitaMD. That's PEITAMD. As all we need is about sort of 10 people in a regional area, and we'll absolutely run the workshop there too. Otherwise, I'll look forward to turning up in your earbuds next week. And remember, Advice Explorers, stay curious.